Hi, this is Don Farber with VineyardSoft Corporation, and I'd like to welcome you to this second training session on query designing in the KnowledgeSync Alerts and Workflow solution. We recommend that you first have listened to and watched the initial training session on query design, as that session familiarizes you with how to connect KnowledgeSync with the underlying applications you wish to monitor, as well as introducing you to the three types of queries that can be designed within the KnowledgeSync system. This training session is going to walk you through the first three steps of designing a query. But before we start those steps, it's worth taking a few minutes and a piece of paper or a whiteboard to jot down the purpose of the query you're about to design and even sketch out the alert message that you might wish to be sent by virtue of the query's conditions proving true. In our exercise today, we're going to start to create a query that identifies customers in an ERP or accounting system whose 90-day balance is greater than a certain value. So consider, if that is the purpose of our query, to identify customers who are very past due in their payments, the next question to ask is, what might we want an alert message to say about that condition? Well, we might want that alert message to identify the customer, their balance, their salesperson's name, and maybe some other contact details about them. It is worth spending the time to sketch out what you want that alert message to look like, as that will make the rest of the query design process in KnowledgeSync that much easier. Once you have that design sketched out, either on paper or in your mind, you're now ready to start designing a new query. So, in the KnowledgeSync Event Manager module, we have expanded the particular application that we want KnowledgeSync to monitor, in this case our ERP or accounting system. We have dropped down one branch to query definitions, and we're going to go up to the extreme top left of our window and click on New Query Definition. Now, the very first time you create a new query for an application in KnowledgeSync, it may take a couple of seconds for the resulting window to open. That's because KnowledgeSync is doing that initial validation check to make sure that your connection to the underlying database is valid, you are authorized to access it, and so on. From that initial opening, all subsequent openings of queries will be virtually instantaneous. All right. Now, our first step is to identify the name or purpose of this query. And as I mentioned just a couple of moments ago, we want KnowledgeSync to look at our client accounts, and we want it to look for accounts where the over 90-day balance is greater than a certain amount. Now, after you initially enter that query description, you can hit your Tab key, which will copy that into the following field. But let me make a couple of comments about the name of this query. We tend to recommend that the first part of your query name refer to the object or item within the database being monitored, in this case, client accounts. The second part of the query description should describe the particular business condition that you want KnowledgeSync to look for, in this case, accounts where the over 90-day balance is greater than a certain amount. You may recall from the first training session on query designing that we talked about something called parameter-driven queries. A parameter-driven query is one that can be used in multiple events. Now, the parameter that we're referring to here is, in fact, the letter X in this query's description. Because we might want to create one event that looks for accounts where the 90-day balance is greater than 5,000, another event that looks for a 90-day balance in excess of 10,000, and even a third event that looks for a balance in excess of 20,000. Although I could create three separate queries for each of those value thresholds, I can be a little clever and create just a single query, like this one, where I've specified that the balance has to be greater than X. That value X is the parameter, and that parameter is actually defined on the event level, thus enabling me to use one query in this case, 3 different events. The only other input-capable field is the active checkbox on this description tab. That is where you're able to say, can this query be used in an event right now? Well, in most cases, you're going to want to say yes, as I've checked the box here. However, if you're not able to complete the design of a query, or if you have questions about the design of a query, you might not want to make it active to ensure that it's not accidentally utilized in a live event. So let's move on to the next tab called Tables. Now this is a good time for me to answer the question about how technical do you need to be in order to create or modify queries of your own? The answer is a fairly simple one. You do not need to be a programmer. You are not writing SQL syntax or any kind of language such as that. However, you do need to be familiar with what's called an applications database schema. In other words, you need to know what tables or files in an application store the corresponding data. Where is my customer account data stored? Where is my salesperson data stored? And so on. If you have that level of knowledge about the applications that you're having KnowledgeSync monitor, you will have no difficulty whatsoever creating and managing your own queries. Now, if we take a look at the Tables tab, you'll notice automatically up at the top, I have a list of tables or files from my underlying ERP or accounting database. These initial tables all start with AP, which I would assume mean accounts payable. If I scroll that list a little bit further down, I'm going to come to my AR or accounts receivables tables. And if I grab my scroll bar and scroll down a little bit further, I'll come to general ledger, inventory, purchasing, and so on. The list that you see here is automatically presented to you by KnowledgeSync, showing you every table in the underlying application database. Now that includes both those pre-configured tables that came with that application, any custom tables that you may have added to that application's database, as well as any views that were created for that particular application. Now we can choose to have KnowledgeSync retrieve data from one or any combination of tables, but this is where our initial work of designing our alert message on that piece of paper or whiteboard really comes in handy. Because if we recall back, we said we wanted to include the customer's name, their balance, etc. Well, that information, I happen to know, comes from a table in this database called the AR customer table. So I'm going to scroll down until I find it, double-click on it, and choose it as a selected table. But if I look at my sketched out alert message, I mentioned that I also might want to include the name of the salesperson who's associated with a customer who has a particularly high balance. Once again, I know this ERP application database, and I know that there's a table called AR salesperson, and so I'm going to choose that table as well. I think those are the only 2 tables I need for this particular query, but don't worry. If in fact you get done designing a query and somewhere down the road you realize that you need to retrieve data from an additional table or 2, you can always come back to this tab and add any additional tables that are needed. So at this point we've chosen our tables and we move on to the next step. In our case, the next step would be the following tab called Links. As a rule, if a query retrieves data from more than one table, you will need to link those tables together. A query with only one table does not require any links. We're going to click on our Links tab so that we can, in fact, link these tables together. Now again, the process of linking tables does not require any programming expertise or language, but again, database schema knowledge, knowing how one table is linked to another or associated with another, is very important. Often you can obtain what's referred to as a database schema from an application vendor, and that will show you not just the list of tables, but the relationships, the links between those tables. I happen to know this ERP database pretty well, so I know how those 2 tables are linked or joined together. So I can come right down to this button called Add Table Link, and use the KnowledgeSync linking wizard to link or join those tables together. Now, as you might recall, this particular query is retrieving data from, at this point, just 2 tables. And so those 2 tables are listed for us. It is here very important that you start out by choosing the primary table that this query is retrieving data from. This is important. The first link in your query, the first table referenced in that link, should be the primary table being interrogated. Well, if I again look at the description of my query, I'm looking at accounts, and I know that the accounting details, the balances, etc., are stored in my AR customer table. It is important that I choose that table first. After that table is chosen first, the order of the subsequent tables really is not that important. It is important that you identify and select the primary table first. Now, KnowledgeSync is automatically going to retrieve the only other table, the salesperson table, assuming that obviously I need to link the customer table to the salesperson table. Now, when we talk about linking, what we're really talking about are what field or what data do those 2 tables have in common? How is a salesperson record in the salesperson table associated with or linked to a customer record in my customer table? Well, again, in this particular ERP or accounting database, I know that there's a field called salesperson number. And so I know that that field actually exists in both of these tables. There's a salesperson number in the customer table, and that refers to a similarly named field, salesperson number, in the salesperson table. And in fact, if such a similarly named field exists, KnowledgeSync will automatically locate it and choose it for you, although you can always override that with the appropriate table if it's different. Now, the link type is going to default to left outer join. And here, I'm going to give you the same advice that my engineers gave me. And they said, Don, if you don't know any better, always choose left outer join. And over 10 years later and 10,000 queries later, every single query I've designed, if it has links, uses the link type called left outer join. There are, as you can see, other join types, and if you know better than I do, then go right ahead and choose those other link types. But if you don't, please do as I do. Choose left outer join, and chances are everything will work out just fine for you. At this point, I can click on OK. I have now linked these 2 tables together. However, there are some occasions, and this is where, again, database schema or database knowledge is absolutely essential, where 2 tables are linked together via not just one field, but via multiple fields. We refer to this as a MultiField link, also referred to as a MultiField join. And so, although that's not very common, it does happen in certain situations with certain applications and databases. And in fact, it actually exists in this particular application between these 2 tables. So I'd like to walk you through the process of creating a multi-field link or join. And please be aware, everything that you're hearing in these training sessions is also contained in the KnowledgeSync manual, which is a free download from the VineyardSoft website. Now, in order to create a secondary link, I'm going to click on Add Table Link again. Once again, the link is going to be between the same 2 tables, the customer table and the salesperson table. In this particular case, however, the linking field is actually going to be on something called the AR division number. And so we're going to choose that from the customer table, and we are going to look for a similar field within the salesperson table, and let's find our salesperson division number field. Again, database schema knowledge is absolutely essential for some databases that get a little bit more sophisticated or complex in terms of how tables are linked together. However, I have chosen my 2 additional fields that I need to link, and I'm going to click on OK. Now, there is one additional step that you need to take. Although I have created two links between these two tables, in fact, these are two independent links. And for this particular relationship, those two links need to be specified all as one command. And so we need to finish this MultiField join by taking just a few last steps. So bear with me as I show you those steps. If you are creating a MultiField link or join, the first thing to do is to scroll your window over to the right a little bit until you find the field called Linked to Column Name. I'm going to go to the very end of my first link, my value in Linked to Column Name, and actually going to click my cursor right in this field. And I'm going to type in a single space, followed by the word and another single space. Here, I then need to simply cut and paste two fields, and my work will be done. So, the additional linking syntax is going to be the AR customer division number. I'm going to highlight that field, hit Control-C to copy it into my buffer, move my window back over, and paste it into this field. So I've now said, and the AR customer division number, and I'm once again going to hit a space bar, the equal sign, and the space bar, and last step, I'm going to grab my final linking value, which is my division number from my salesperson table. I'm going to copy that, going to make this field a little bit bigger to make it easier for editing, and paste it in here. So again, when you're creating a MultiField link or join, go ahead and follow the wizard to create the second link independently, but then simply cut and paste the values as I've just done, at which point you can remove that secondary link, and we now have a MultiField join, all done collectively in a single statement. Okay, at this point, we are ready to start choosing fields or columns for this particular query. However, we're going to hold that off for a following training session. I would just like to finish up this training session by pointing out that down at the bottom of the Links tab, there is a button that you can click on that says, I would like to manually input the table linking. Quite honestly, we recommend that you not choose that option. Although you can do so, and it is fully supported, this is really designed for performing linking in an application or databases that does not use standard SQL linking syntax. And fortunately, these days, there are fewer and fewer of those applications on the market. Over 99% of all applications and the linking that you need to do can be done through the wizard, as we've just seen. So keep in mind that if you are working with a substandard or somewhat unique, shall we say, application or database where the standard linking syntax provided by KnowledgeSync is not sufficient, you do have access to this option. However, you shouldn't truly have to use it. All right. At this point, I am going to save and close my query. And we're going to get a warning message to let us know that this query is being saved without a unique column. That's quite all right. We haven't even gotten to the point of choosing columns yet, so that's quite all right. We'll say, okay, this particular query will be saved. And at this point, we are ready at our leisure to go back into that query and start choosing the actual fields of data referred to as columns for that particular query. And that step will be covered in Query Designing Training Class number 3. So I thank you very much for your attention to the first 3 steps of designing a query. Again, my name is Don Farber. I thank you very much for your time and look forward to speaking with you in an ensuing Query Design Training session. Thank you very much.